This is the Tabernacle Podcast with me, John Vermilius, standing in for Britton Bishop. He's gone again. And we have special guests today, in the flesh, real, live friends of mine. Yes, I do have friends. Friends of the Tabernacle, although they don't get to get up here very often. Sports missionaries, Graham and Lori West with Missionary Athletes International. So excited to have you here. Welcome, Graham and Lori.
Thanks.
Great to be here.
Is it really great to be here?
It is.
Is it?
Peak season.
Peak season for leaves. Yeah. It's something you don't get in your part of the world, you said.
Not to this extent.
Not to this extent, but from
beautiful.
Living right now in Charlotte, North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
have spent most of your time there. You also did a stint overseas, living in Thailand. Have been all over the world, using the sport of soccer to advance the kingdom. And so it's a privilege to have you here. The church is, for our podcast family, the Tabernacle has been investors in your ministry for the last, decade or so.
Yeah.
And you've been here before, and you've brought greetings on video, but we were so pumped to have you guys. We've been for a couple of years, just when would it work with your schedule, with ours, and then to actually get you up here for a few days. Hopefully it'll be restful. I know I'm not that restful, being around me, staying in my house.
It's
but
all relative.
Hey, at least Darcy's making awesome breakfast, right? So
That's right.
At least you get a breakfast.
That was worth it.
Yeah. So let's just go back to the beginning. Just where are you guys from? How did you meet? How did you ever get in sports ministry? Is that a thing? I'm pretending like I don't know. So, yeah, Graham, where were we born?
I was born in Toronto, Canada. So my parents are from Australia, moved over to Canada a year before I was born. Grew up in Toronto and a little bit in Montreal. But when I was 19, my family moved down to the States with my dad's business to Ohio, and I ended up going to a school that was about an hour from where we lived called Fort Wayne Bible College. And I didn't know much about colleges or universities of any sort down here, but I knew at that point in my life, I thought, I know I want to, I had played soccer growing up, and I thought, well, hey, these guys have a soccer team and it's a Bible school. I probably should learn a little bit more about the Bible, and so that's where I went.
Right.
Yeah.
You grew up in a Christian home?
I did. My family, we went to a church in Toronto called the People's Church, huge missions-oriented church up there. And I remember every year they would have missions conferences. And, I was maybe a typical kid growing up over here where, you don't really, maybe you don't take your faith very seriously, or, you're just sort of observing a lot. But I remember at the missions conferences, they would bring people in from all over the world, and they'd all be wearing their native garb. And
oh, yeah.
so that was a little more
Yeah.
colorful and exciting than the typical service.
Yeah,
So I thought,
yeah.
okay, that's interesting, But,
Yeah.
it was. So I grew up in that environment. I remember the pastor Oswald J. Smith up there, a great man, and he said that in North America, people are unevangelized by choice because there's a church on every street corner. I always thought that was a little bit interesting, but because of that, he had, a huge investment in world missions. But, hey, growing up, didn't really think too much about it. But, the older I got, the more I started to really consider who God was in my life. But it wasn't until I had moved down to the States and really got more serious about my faith.
So you want to go to college to play soccer, maybe learn a bit about the Bible. Was this where you met Lori?
It was.
Well, where's Lori from? Lori, what's your backstory? Where did Lori come from?
Born in Detroit.
Oh, Michigan. See, we're winning already. You just won them all over, right? Because they love the wives, and she's from Michigan. So we're down. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Somewhat of the lone Christian in the family.
Mm-hmm.
Mother died when I was 19, but as probably from 8 years old to throughout high school, I was like, oh, where am I going to live? What am I going to do? I was just extremely focused
Mm-hmm.
and a planner. So kind of journeying through everything in middle school and high school, I met the Lord. He met me, changed me completely, and got me focused on a Christian. I just wanted to go to a Christian university. I just want to learn more. I want to go deeper, see the world, see what God has for my life. And it was back in the day when you would go to the library.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was called the Peterson's Guide to Schools.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a
So
big
I
old
remember
manual. Yeah.
like opening up this massive book in the library and just going page by page and seeing like what schools are like offering. I was interested in Christian counseling or something in that area of study, and there were only a few back then. One was in Hawaii Pacific probably, something in California, and then Fort Wayne Bible College. And I could drive there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
where I applied. I had to find a school that I could get myself to.
Yeah.
And I had a car, my $400 light blue Rabbit.
Oh, my goodness.
And that got me to Fort Wayne. And that's where I applied for scholarship. I did everything I could to go to this little school. And kind of it was just the Lord just putting me on a different path and using the way I'm wired and my personality to move me from that environment. But he had much bigger plans than my little brain knew, because I met Graham.
Yeah. Well, I know enough about the story to know. Now, I'm a dude, and I'm forwarding just a little bit. The first time I met Graham, I'm 19 years old. I'm on a soccer missions tour, my first ever missions trip. I grew up on the mission field, as most of our listeners know, but this was my first thing. It was this kind of all-Christian soccer team, and he was one of the older guys on the team. And that was closer to the time after I know it's after college, but I wanted his hair. I wanted his height. I wanted his moves. He was the coolest.
Yeah, he was.
He wore Diodoras. I wanted some Diodoras. Those are shoes for those of you that don't know. And he was introverted, and I was always talking, and I just wanted to be the strong, silent, cool. Oh, and my mullet curved up. His hung straight. He looked like a rock star on the field, the way British guys felt about Glenn Hoddle, And it was like, so I'm imagining on tiny little Fort Wayne Bible campus, because Graham just didn't play soccer. I'm going to say this, he didn't say this. Graham dominated at Fort Wayne Bible in the NAI at that time. I don't know the exact number, and you're too humble to probably tell me, but he scored all the goals. All-America, the whole deal. That record still stands. It'll never be broken. It was ridiculous, right? And so he was like, you obviously soccer. Like, you're not a soccer person. You're not necessarily a sports person.
I'm definitely a sports person, but they didn't have soccer
in Detroit, right?
For girls back then. I played everything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, Graham, long
person.
hair guy in the jean pinstripe jacket.
Looking like he stepped out of NXS.
And, the teacher would we had classes together. The teacher would say, "Hey, Graham, good game, scored 4 goals, this or that," and then Graham would just go,
Yeah.
"Thanks,"
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, "Oh, he must be a good soccer player." But he's so humble.
Yeah.
And cute
Yeah.
and long hair.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, we just hit it off and hung out the whole time that we were there. We didn't date, but we were best friends, and it was like 5 years later that we
Really?
reunited and ended up getting married within the year.
Right. Now, did you both know you wanted to do missions? Or was that how did that unfold? You met in college. Like, what did you do after college? Just the first couple of years before you reunited?
In 1986, which I know.
I was still in high school.
Yeah. a lot of people listening to this probably were never even born, I know.
Yeah.
But some people had gone through, it was a sports ministry, which I had never heard of before.
Me neither, yeah.
And they were kind of circling around the country. There was a bunch of guys in a Winnebago going around college to college, and they were playing little indoor matches with a bunch of guys at different schools. And so I was asked if I wanted to go to this one school nearby. And so a bunch of us were there. So we played the game. But then after the game, these guys shared about sports ministry. And they said, "Hey, if you're interested, we're taking a team down to the World Cup in Mexico this summer." So it was for a month. And it was Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras. And I thought, that'd be cool, playing Well, I ended up, I was a soccer player who happened to be a Christian, went on that trip. I came back as a Christian who happened to be a soccer player.
Yeah,
that rocked my world down there. Just sitting back every day, and just the biggest thing for me was just, I felt like God was actually using me. I was a believer at the time, and I knew I loved the game, but the way that all kind of came together at that point, I came back, I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
My faith became so much more relevant to me at that time. I was seeing God working. I was with other guys that, we're all kind of going after the same thing, and they love Jesus. I'm like, okay, this is different.
Yeah.
That was,
like I 100% resonate with that, because when I go to that first tour that I first met you, that same metamorphosis was happening in me. I went on the trip as a soccer player because it was my idol, because it was my identity. That happened to be a Christian, and it flipped 100%. And on our mutual trip, which was to Bangladesh, and it was probably the same thing that you had. I'm going to go play internationally. I'm a college guy, but I've been asked to be on this I'm going to get an international cap. Even though we're a club team. Even though we're called the Seahorses, because at that time I think the ministry was based in L.A. But it was a similar thing. So you just got involved in sports ministry. God using your passions, changing your heart, and then saying, "Oh, it's okay that you love this game, but just give it to me and let me use it." Essentially, that's what I experienced. Was it similar for you?
It was. And, as Lori was saying, Lori played basketball and softball and, played all regional teams and played in, collegiately and everything. So we both had this, at that point, we both had this acknowledgement of, hey, sports is a pretty effective way, to reach people. But it was that trip where we were both going to go. Well, sorry, that was Bangladesh '89.
Yeah, that was 3 years after.
And then
86
2 years later, we went on another one to Russia.
Russia, yeah, that's right.
And that's where we were both going to go on that trip. And we ended up it ended up where I just went and Lori stayed.
Half the money came in, so we're like, okay, you can go.
And somewhere in there you got married, right?
In 89,
Yeah.
right after Bangladesh.
89.
Right after
Gotcha.
Bangladesh, we
That's
got
right.
married.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Russia trip was, we were raising support for both of us. Almost exactly to the penny, half the money came in. So we're like, okay, Lord, so you go.
Yeah.
So I stayed.
And he dominated.
And I was working for the Cove, the Billy Graham Association in Asheville. And kind of just really by myself, alone. You know, we were not apart back then.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like the first time he's like way over on the other side of the world, and Graham's experiencing what he's experiencing. I'm alone with the Lord. The Lord's really meeting me. And we would, when it was possible, we would try a landline call, because that's what you did back then.
No
And
cell phones, no
No,
internet.
cell, you know,
phones,
nothing
yeah.
like that. So maybe one time he could call from Russia, and it was a really bad connection, very delayed. And he gets through, and we're trying to communicate. And he's like, it's just amazing over here. God is doing all these incredible things. People are coming to the Lord on the street. They're just
I remember.
so hungry for the gospel and a copy of even pieces of the Bible in their language, and just praying to accept Christ on the street outside of the McDonald's where there's a long line of people. And so he's trying to tell me all this, and I'm like totally hearing the Holy Spirit's work in both of us. Like I'm really connecting the dots here, and I'm like, that's amazing. I just, and I'm talking this, so I'm going, I just feel like God's really using this time, and that all that matters. And then Graham cuts in because there's delay, and he's saying, I just feel like God is saying all that matters is, and we're like about to say the same thing, is knowing God and making him known.
Mm.
We had both come to those very specific words alone, apart from each other.
Knowing God and making him known.
And it was just this moment of, whoa, yeah, God is using this experience. He's continuing to guide us and speak to us in clear ways that we can compute by using these exact same words. And so it shifted our trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
And when you came back from Russia is when we started talking and praying about what is it that the Lord wants us to do. We just wanted to be available to knowing him and making him known any way he had planned for us. So that kind of started the whole seeking out the missions opportunities using sport.
Right. And for those people that you're like, well, how does that happen on a missions tour, any creative way with a round ball? If you've been overseas, it's the currency of the world. Mm-hmm. Music and soccer are the things that seem to and food are like the generators of the world. And so, like I remember on the streets of Russia, that could be a bunch of guys in tracksuits. We've just had lunch in a McDonald's, and now we're juggling a soccer ball in the city square. And then next thing you know, there's a crowd, and then someone might share a testimony. And in Russia at that time, they're hungry for anything pre-internet.
Starving,
you know, in another part of the world, that might be a player sharing a testimony at a halftime or after a game or at a pre or post game dinner. We did soccer clinics for kids where we're playing soccer with kids, teaching them a little skills. Usually in some countries, they're teaching us more than we know because that's the only game they've ever played. And again, an opportunity to share values from the Bible or to share the gospel. And so it was compelling. I know it was for you and what you're describing, but God's working on your heart, even though you didn't have that experience yet. If I can just say, I don't know if I've ever said this, you're one of my wife's closest friends. We were on staff at the same mission for about 10 years. I've always been spectacularly humbled by Lori's faith. Just a woman of the word, a woman who knew the business of the kingdom and was, we'd say, Lori, don't play when it comes to that stuff. It was real, really what was happening here. So was it right after that time, like early 90s, that because you'd done some coaching, you're working at the Billy Graham Center. I know there was some time you spent on the West Coast coaching as well. When did you decide, okay, this is going to be our vocation? We're going to do the hard thing that missionaries have to do. We got to raise our support. We got to talk to people, talk to churches, get people behind us. Was it right around there that you made the decision, or how did that?
Yeah. So when we were on the West Coast, I was coaching at the women's team at Westmont College.
Right.
Lori was a director at an after-school program at a Christian school. And so we had been there, I was out there for 3 years, but then we decided to move back to North Carolina. But when we moved back, we had been involved with MAI, on and off through these trips. But then we had said, well, hey, what are you doing? Like, do you ever take these trips out for women, for girls? And they were like, well, we've talked about it for years, but we just haven't had anybody that, to really step up and want to do that. So we said, well, hey, we'd be interested. So we ended up doing that, and that was in 92. So in 91, we began the process of getting that trip together. We worked with some other people, and we ended up going over to England. And we had a phenomenal time just leading that team together.
Like an all-Christian girls team doing ministry in the UK.
So we recruited girls from around the country at different colleges and universities. If you're interested in using your gifts and abilities to glorify God overseas and partner with churches and mission organizations there, hey, we're taking a trip. So gathered them up, and they came out of the woodwork, and we took a team over in 92 over to England. And that just solidified, in our hearts, just like, hey, this makes a lot of sense. Like you said, I mean, sports is a universal language. Soccer, or football, as it's known, is the world's most popular sport. It's cheap, it's easy. You just need something to kick around and some space.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that really, and then it was really just 6 months later in 92 when we said, hey, we're going to join full time, and we joined full time at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And that was
that 93? 93.
Well, it was the end of 92 and then
into
93. So it's been like just over 30 years now.
Right. And at the time, Missionary Athletes International, or MAI, its first office was in L.A., and then the East Coast office was in Charlotte. Now there's actually one in Chicago. Is there a fourth one I don't know about?
Well,
there's several overseas now.
And we actually have one in High Point, North Carolina.
Okay.
And then just opened one in Phoenix. And I was just there this past weekend. That's amazing what's taking place there. And then we're also we're just now opening one down in Orlando, Florida.
Wow.
We do have a few people. We've got a couple in Japan. They're Japanese couple there, nationals, and they're doing an amazing job there. We've got a guy in the Ukraine and a guy in Israel.
Right.
So a couple hot spots there right now, obviously.
No doubt.
But yeah, I mean, Lord's just blessed the organization, and it just continues to grow in His timing. We just try to stay out of the way.
Yeah. So. Like I remember, so the way our stories ended up intersecting was God's working the same thing in my wife and I. And we actually joined Missionary Athletes International a year after you did. 1994, we're moving to Charlotte. Darcy doesn't know anybody. She's the Buckley girl that met the dude at the Christian college, and we're doing sports ministry. She's scared to death. It's a big city. And you were some of the first friends that she made and was like, okay, I can go to Target with her. We can go for coffee. We can be friends. We can, when kids started to come, you know, our oldest and your oldest were like siblings. They fought. They also played house, you know, all of those different types of things. But we were much on the same track. But again, the sports ministry model, back in the day, we used to say we use teams and we use tours and we use soccer camps. So they're stateside camps because like your pastor in Toronto said, there's a lot of people that choose not to be evangelized here. We've on this podcast said so many times, even within the church, you'll have families that are committed to church, but only church on the weekend because sports takes over their lives. The kids won't be involved in a kids program or a youth program or what have you because we get it all out of whack. And so we were doing ministry on this side of the pond. And in Charlotte, there was a pro soccer team, there were amateur teams, and then there's tours. And you were really the pioneer for MAI with taking women's teams, specifically. You played on the pro team, did the camps and all that, but really led the way as far as women going on these trips.
And they're natural sports ministers.
Natural.
I mean, they could,
absolutely. And the women's, the USA women were like some of the best in the world at the time. And so, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, they're just, it was such a beautiful thing to watch on tours with the women because they could just make conversation with anyone. The language barrier didn't matter. They just figured it out. Any people who had any sorts of gifts like acting, singing, juggling, it didn't matter. They used everything. They were all in, organically, very authentically communicated God's love to these people. I mean, it was amazing to watch it. And we felt really privileged to be a part of that because they are natural sports ministers. They're just, at that time, there wasn't really an avenue for women to participate in this way. So when we were able to do that together, it was just fun because it was both of us using our different gifts. I wasn't playing soccer. I was just there, and
she was more than just there.
And
I know Graham well enough.
I mean,
to
I
know.
used who I am in
There's
the
this
ministry.
word. It
but
starts with an A and it ends with a administration.
Yes,
and Lori ran Graham was the director, but make no mistake, none of them would get to the airport on time if it wasn't for Lori.
I happily picked up the pieces.
Yeah, because we're talking a trip would be
Such
25
a nice way
people.
to put it.
It would be anywhere from 15 to 25 people, depending, that are going. Support staff, chaplains,
and this
trainers.
is before the internet.
Yes.
So it was like
everything
fax
was paper.
machines and copies of
Passports.
passports and all these visa applications.
Snail mail.
Oh, yeah.
Really interesting.
I remember the
now to look
mailings
back.
because now this is not about me, but now I'm in the same office. I'm not only on the same pro team with Graham. All right, let's be honest, Graham's a better player than me. But I'm now in the office with Graham, and we're in the same department. He's the women's tour director. I'm a youth tour director, so I'm taking high school teams. He's taking women's college teams. And one of the things we left out on a serious note was one of the reasons we say that soccer was such a currency was it got us into places, and you way more than me. Because when you take high school students, there's a certain amount of safety that parents are expecting. But when you have college students, there's a little bit more we can step out. But some of the countries that you've been able to minister in, which we won't even name on the podcast, are, for whatever reason or another, it's just more sensitive to get into those places.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's I should probably just be quiet. But there's a part of the ministry where soccer got you in
Mm-hmm.
because if you led with missions or Jesus, you wouldn't get in.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, in fact, in one of the places we've already mentioned in Bangladesh.
That's right.
When we went over there, remember that they were. We went over as they were kicking missionaries out of that country.
That's right, and persecuting Bengali Christian pastors. Yeah.
Remember, and there was the hospital. The only missionaries, or some of the only missionaries they didn't kick out at that time, were a group of doctors and nurses at a hospital compound in Malamgat in the middle of nowhere.
We stayed there.
Yeah. We stayed there, and there was somebody in the hospital at that time, and he was a believer. And because of that, it's a highly, not a lot of believers there.
Yeah.
And they set his house on fire, and he rushed his family out, and he went running out. His feet were all burned and charred, and as he ran out of the house, they had a machete. And he was in the hospital there, but he had a bandaged neck from the machete wounds, and his feet were black. But it was simply because of his faith.
Believer. Yeah, and those stories have a profound impact when you're realizing, we come from a country where being a believer is relatively easy in comparison, and then you just see the importance of the gospel and why this is, why so many people are hungry for the gospel. And to be a part of that, it still is, because you're still living it. Somehow I got up here in Bucktucky. That's a different part of the story. But for us, that was a great decade.
Mm-hmm.
It was traveling, because I love to travel. I love soccer, love the mission, of course. And with Jesus at the forefront, it was just like all of these things just kind of fell in line.
Mm-hmm.
So you're living in Charlotte. Kids, we have children. Are we allowed to say their names on the podcast? We're not. Okay, we can't say their names on the podcast. They have a son. Really?
Top secret.
Really? We're not allowed to say their names? Okay. You have a son and a daughter, and my kids love your kids. And somewhere in there, I know a big shift happened where MAI really started being intentional about helping churches develop sports ministry programs for themselves. Because if we go back, even as you were sharing your story, in 1986, you were like, sports ministry, a traveling indoor team. I remember when I ran into one of our mutual friends, a man named Rick McKinley. I was at Urbana at a youth convention as a senior in high school. And this guy saw me walking by, and it's cold. It's Urbana, Illinois. And we're all bundled up, and I'm going to a shuttle bus. And I think I was wearing Adidas Samba indoor shoes, or probably in 1988. I'm only saying this for Graham. They were Patrick Missiles, right? But they're obviously, you remember that shoe. You had some. Yeah. So I had, and we were the renegades back in the day. You had the hair. You were soccer guys. You're the weirdos. You're not real American football, And this guy called me over, and he goes, "Oh, you're a soccer player." We got in a convo. He got my name, the whole deal. And then as a freshman in college, that's when I got this invitation to be on that team. And it was perfect time, and God used it. But the sports ministry idea was brand new, and it was transformative for you guys. It was transformative for me. But somewhere along the way, the overseas part became more about not one-off trips, but more sustaining something. How did that kind of come about, and how did that lead you guys to actually go overseas and live overseas?
Yeah. It's a great question, because it gets down to the core of why we do what we do in a lot of ways. So in 2008, we had continued to take these trips overseas and different things, but but we wanted to, there was always just this, thing hanging over our heads a little bit in the ministries. How can we better serve the church? We didn't want to be an organization that just used the church, where we, just, show up and then, they can do the discipleship and, how can we help come alongside the church and actually serve their existing ministry strategies? But we didn't really know what that looked like. And in 2008, we ended up going over to moving to Thailand. So Lori and our kids, we lived in Thailand for 3 years. We were serving there. We were seconded or loaned to SIM, which is a church planting organization in Africa, Asia, South America. But they had a sporting arm called Sports Friends. And Brian Davidson, who started the Charlotte office with MAI.
Big influence in my life.
Yep. And in a lot of people's lives. Yeah. And so he and another gentleman, Trip Johnson, they had started Sports Friends, the sporting arm of SIM. Well, they were starting a new office that was going to serve Southeast Asia. And so we moved over there to help them get that office off the ground and train up some national leadership there. So during that time, it was just a really interesting time. It's one of the first things we did when we went over for 6 months is we just traveled around Thailand and met with pastors and leaders and denominational leaders and just asked questions, and so we, after that time, that we started to understand just how all this, was going to, continue to piece together in that particular context. So after 3 years, and that ministry is continuing to thrive there, but we moved back, and so now we were back in Charlotte. And just trying to get our minds around a little bit, okay, what is this supposed to look like within MAI and how are we supposed to grow and develop that way? So long story short, one thing led to another, and we developed a training curriculum. And so in MAI, we've identified 2 main audiences that we reach: players and coaches. And so we have a lot of things going for players. We have teams where we bring players in and they play and they might run camps, but they're also trained up in sports ministry. So they learn, about, they dig into the word and how does that, dovetail into their faith and how do they live their faith out on the field and so on for the players. But then for the coaches, we developed this training, and it basically goes after understanding your philosophy. So that same core content, we developed a curriculum for the players and a curriculum for the coaches.
It's just different if I'm a player or a coach in the application.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly. Yeah. So internationally, that is more geared toward the coaches. And so we go after, hey, we gather people together, or we have partners, and they gather these individuals together that want to become a coach, to either go back to their church, go back to their mission organization. So we come in and help them develop a coaching philosophy. To develop a coaching philosophy, you have to know 2 things. You have to know yourself, and you have to know your objective. So we walk through that. So we take a couple of days when we conduct a training. We bring these coaches together, and these trainings have been anywhere from 10 to 200 coaches, right? We bring them together, and we just walk through, first of all, knowing yourself. And we start with the gospel. That's the lens through which we view everything else and process everything else. That leads us to understanding our identity. Is our identity in our performance and as an athlete, It's massive.
Massive.
Is it in our performance, or is it in who we are in Christ? Where does our worth fall? That leads us, and that influences our motivation. Is our motivation to glorify God or to glorify self?
Right.
And then we talk about competition and how all of those things unfold and how do we react and respond within competition. So that's just unpacking knowing yourself, like especially if you're involved in sport, but whatever you do.
Yeah.
We all carry this baggage, right? That we bring in to the situation, and we need to unpack those bags and replace really those lies that we've grown up to believe with truth.
Right.
And so understanding yourself, but then also understanding your objective. And so when it comes to sport, when you think about the purpose of sport, and if you asked anybody out there in the wide world of sport, you say, hey, what's your purpose?
To win.
Totally.
Yeah.
Big fat W, right?
Yeah.
But to take a step back and we say, okay, part of what we want to see here is sports redeemed and reclaimed for God's purpose. We want to replace that W with a T of transformation. We want to see transformation in the lives of these kids that are being entrusted to us. How do you get there? So understanding your objective is, how do you see that take place? You first of all understand the team, your role as a coach within the team, that powerful platform of that relationship between a coach and a player. Billy Graham once said, he said, a coach can influence more people in one season than most people can in a lifetime.
I didn't know he said that.
He did.
He's one of my heroes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's a powerful statement, but it's, there's a lot of people that have a lot of influence on,
right.
people. These are teachers and parents, obviously.
But if you're in sports, a coach even more than a teacher.
Well, because it's a motivating environment.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a magnet for these kids, right? They want to be involved. So anyway, there's this environment of this team, and and a coach, they wear so many different hats, whether it's a motivator, a teacher, a shepherd, so many different things. Counselor.
Yeah.
So
father figure.
Yeah, totally.
Mother figure.
Totally.
Yeah.
So you have all those dynamics with the team, but then that leads to the culture. And we go after three key things within the culture: creating culture, growing culture, and protecting culture. And creating it really revolves around just establishing values within your team. And if you as the coach don't create the culture, your players will.
They'll create it.
I mean, it is, and every team that exists out there, it already has a culture, whether you realize it or not. So 100%. Being intentional around those values and how those are played out. And so then, growing the culture, what does that look like? And then protecting it. And so we really unpack all of that, which really tills the soil, so to speak, because ultimately the purpose is transformation lives of these kids. And this is sport, right? So winning's a goal. Yeah. But it's not our purpose.
Right.
The purpose is to see transformation in the lives of these kids.
So over the years, and MAI has grown so much since or Darcy and I were on staff. But just listening to you talk, it's so compelling because like images in my mind, you've sent me links to videos. Graham is in blank country or this country or whatever. And I'll watch these videos and I see my friend Graham, and sometimes I think the last one I watched, you were with the legend Dave Sanford, another North Carolina coaching legend, right? And you're in one part of the world, and I won't say the name, but it looks like it's a church lawn. It's not really a lawn. It's more dirt than lawn. And there's all of these nationals, and there's images of you guys in a classroom, and you're going through this curriculum. Mm-hmm. And then I see you guys out on the field, and there's demonstrations and you're running through drills and all this kind of stuff. So church-based sports ministry is not just showing the kids director how to do a soccer camp for kids. Right. It's long-term for these Christian coaches that are now going to have an influence beyond the week or month or however long or however many interactions that you've had with them. So it becomes something that is self-sustaining.
That's right.
Yeah. So I imagine transformation happens with these players and coaches, because one of the things, and I hope our audience is catching this, this is what God did in my life in the 10 years where I'm teaching this and learning it at the same time, because we were in an environment where it was highly competitive. You're competing for a spot in the starting lineup on, at the time, MAI owned a professional team in the USL. You're competing against other teams. The pro environment is the most cutthroat environment you can possibly be in.
Yeah.
And you're trying to look at all through this through the lens of the gospel.
Yeah.
And where we get it wrong is, I see here in the States, because I'm still in the sports culture, I'm a coach, all that stuff about culture. I'm so grateful for a church that supports that I'm still coaching high school. That they see that as an extension of who I am and my ministry and so forth. Our whole staff are committed to those things. We don't always get it right. But where the disconnect is people think, here's my faith over here, and then here's sports over here, and never the two shall meet. So I wanted to go back to that for a minute. Is you said everything through the lens of the gospel. That's not just for sports. That's for life, my work life, my relationships, my friendship, my sports life, me being a parent, a helicopter parent with my kid in his basketball career life. It has to be through the lens of the gospel. Otherwise, we're not biblical Christians. We're cultural Christians that kind of go on a weekend, but it's not like it's all the way back to what you said on your first trip. You were a soccer player who happened to be a Christian, and it switched for you. You became a Christian who happened to be a soccer player and a soccer coach. Why do you think we struggle with that? Is it just the inherent part of sports, or our competitive nature, our pride? What is it that makes it so difficult for people to shift that lens and put it on sports, either as a player, or parent, or coach?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could go off on another number of directions here, but I think personally, I mean, so much of that comes back to identity, and that's why we dig so deep with identity in our training, because we care so much about what other people think so often. And sports is one of those areas where you perform, and it's performance driven. There's a spotlight on it. They say that sports doesn't build character, it reveals character. And, well, a lot is revealed when you're playing sport, because every emotion that you can imagine when you're involved in sport plays itself out. High highs and low lows, and, every emotion you can imagine. And so sports has just become this thing out there that carries so much weight. You see professional sports, right, out there, whatever sport you want to watch, and there's just this trickle down effect. But at the highest levels of professional sport, it's almost glamorized to a point where, that's the ultimate, be able to, you're rich and you get everything you want. You get all the money and the cars and the women and this and that. And there's this worldly carrot that's just thrown out there, and that just permeates the entire sports realm and the world.
It reeks of self.
It absolutely
reeks of self.
Absolutely self. It's extremely self-centered and self-serving, and so out of that, and I did this too myself. I mean, you grow up when you are performing and you're recognized because of that performance.
I mean, that's how you got Lori.
It works.
No, it was the long hair.
It was the long hair.
Now you tell me. No, but you do learn to almost to believe that your worth does depend on your performance. whether you're in sport, whether you're in business, whether you're a mom, whether you're like
Yeah.
so many things, like it comes back to believing that your worth is based on what you do.
Right.
And that's sort of the nature. It's human nature a little bit. And because there's this void that we have in us. And so sports is one of those things that causes us to fill that void with things of the world, right? And so what are we filling that void? But it's the thing to recognize, I think, is just we were created that way. To have this longing and belong. We want to be loved and cherished, and we have this need to belong. But God created us that way because He is what
Fills that. Yeah.
Right. And so that's a beautiful That's a beautiful
way
picture
that you just said that too. That it isn't. You're not bad for the longing. You're not bad for the longing. That's how you're made.
Right.
But it's what are we filling it with? Mm-hmm. So you talk about identity. We've talked about. In fact, I think we did a whole episode on this, and it's something we always take our Fight Club guys through. I think the Tab women do it. We always talk about it in church. I imagine you spent a little bit of time in Ephesians chapter 1 when it talks about all of the identity in Christ. For those who are in Christ, you are loved, you are adopted, you are forgiven, you are chosen, you are, or grace has been lavished upon you, you are gifted. And all of that happens if your life is hidden with Christ, and it has nothing to do with how many goals you scored at Fort Wayne Bible.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with whether or not you get to use your sporting ability in this ministry, the one sport you didn't play, right? The one sport that wasn't available to you. You're going to marry a soccer guy and your whole life is devoted to this thing. And I'm sure that there was an identity piece for you. Where do I find my place in this? Now, I've watched you find your place, but you guys, it's Graham and Lori are a package deal and always have been in this ministry. It's not just Graham's thing. I was also going to ask, how much of that curriculum did you type? Right? Because Graham's a Jedi.
I proofed everything.
Yeah, you proofread the whole thing, the whole journal thing, right? But that's just so powerful, and I'm really glad the way you took that beyond just sports, because the identity thing is something that we all, and what's weird is like addicts will look for it in other places.
Yeah.
I can sell him out because he's my bro and he usually sits in this chair and he's not here. But Britton is a huge football fan. He was an offensive lineman and he's one of the biggest Oklahoma football fans of all time. And I'm thinking, I think it was last year, Oklahoma lost. And it was on a Saturday. And at the Saturday evening service, he's listening because I think he was the backup preacher in Manistee in case the video failed. But he's also watching the score, and it's just, he just can't believe it. And this is our youth pastor, man. This guy is one of our teaching pastors, and he's just, and we're talking about it after the game, or after the church service. I got to be careful. The church doesn't become my new game of performance, right? And he's just like, I can't believe this. And we're standing there with a man you haven't met, but who's been on this podcast. His name's Joe Kelly, the Jedi. And Britton is like, why do I care so much about this? And he's like 26 and Joe Kelly, 81. He looks at him and he says, because you still think it matters. And then dropped the mic and walked away. That still bothers Britton. He goes, when he said, because I think it matters. His whole mind he's like the mind blown emoji. But if you think about that, that's where we're at. Well, my identity matters, yes. But when my identity's wrapped up in the performance, either of the team that I'm a fan of, the team that I'm playing on, the team I'm coaching, the team my kid is on, you see people lose their mind because yes, it matters, but in the scheme of things, back to the lens of the gospel, does it really matter?
Right.
I mean, things that I did not represent Christ well in my 4 years of college. I don't remember those people or those games or the score or what happened. But 30 years later, did it really matter?
Right.
But in that moment, it was probably more important that I represented Christ, or was obedient to Christ, or glorified Christ, rather than thinking that it matters so much. And I'm not just talking about a temper on a field, the way it could just dominate a life, and that's universal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. Share.
Please
quick
do.
Story.
Yeah, we love them.
Because this
is our podcast. We do whatever we want. So yeah,
this is something that sort of somewhat influenced our decision as we kind of part of the process. I guess I should say, as we were heading into ministry a lot of years ago. So 30 odd years ago, right after we left California, we moved back to Asheville, and I was coaching at a college there. And I took over right before the season began, so I didn't have time to recruit any players there. And it was a bit of a mess of a team, to be quite honest. I mean, some guys had played, some hadn't, whatever. So, the first training comes around, we start, I'm like, this is going to be a long season, right? Goes, play, first game comes, we lose that, keep training, lose the second game, lose the third game. And it keeps going. And halfway through the season, like, are some of our guys, okay, they start to get, we're a little more organized as a team. Guys are like starting to understand their roles a little bit better on the field. And we start to compete. And then we tie a game. And then we tie another game. Well, we're getting toward the end of the season now. We're still looking for that first win. And we're about to play a team that we had lost 1-0 at the beginning of the season. So now we're thinking, all right, we're a better team now. Like, come on, guys, So it's a Saturday. We play this game, and it starts, and it is back and forth. I mean, it's pretty intense. Tackles going in here. And as it's going, the ref keeps blowing the tweet, blowing the whistle, stopping the game. I'm like, come on, ref, let him play. Our guys are just, there's a home game, the crowd's there,
Oh, yeah.
And it's back and forth. And, the ball will go out of bounds. It's our throw. And tweet, he calls it for the other team. Ref, that's our throw. That's,
Injustice.
Totally. So
I know this ref.
Yeah.
I'm with you, heart and soul.
The universal ref.
Yeah.
So anyway, halfway through the first half, he makes a call. Someone from the other team says something to the ref. So the ref turns around, calls my captain over to him, gives him a yellow card, right? A caution.
Yeah.
Like, ref, he didn't even say anything. Ref, come here, I want to talk to you. Like,
yeah.
He wouldn't talk to me, which just enraged me even more.
Yeah.
Keeps going, tackles in, tweet, breaking the game. Come on, ref, let him play. Halftime comes, 0-0. I bring the guys in, make a couple of changes, get them fired up again. They go back out. Come on, guys, we're tasting blood. We're starting to taste it, right?
Yeah.
Starts again right off the bat again, tackles in hard, And then at one point, like a guy on the other team starts dribbling down the field. My captain runs over, perfect slide tackle, pops back up with the ball, starts going the other way. Tweet! Referee blows the whistle. Goes over to my captain, gives him a second yellow card.
He's out of the game.
That's a red card. He's out of the game. Now we have to play a man down for the rest of the game, and my captain can now not play the last game of our season next game.
Yeah. You are livid. You are done.
Come here. I want to talk to you. He would not. He was like sort of like giving me the the snub, right?
Right.
So I go to the linesman. I want to talk to him. He would not come over to me. The game keeps going back and forth, and it's intense, right? The game ends. We lost 1-0. As soon as he blew that final whistle, I walked straight out to that referee and I told him exactly what I thought of him as a ref, as a person. I was up one side and down the other, just lighting him up.
I've never seen Graham that way in my life.
I was fired up. And I blamed him for like everything we had worked for this season. We had accomplished a lot that season.
Yeah.
Like regardless.
This was a chance to get your first
Never
win.
mind, right. Never mind the record. I mean, what those guys had accomplished, and we were right there. And I said what I wanted to say to him, and I turn around, and there's my team standing there with their eyes wide open, just looking at me like, what in the world? And suddenly I felt like, oh gosh, what have I just done? I was a believer at the time. I'm a nice guy. I'm laid back. I like people,
Yeah.
And I had just laid into this guy. I had even so I'm a believer that my players, not believers, but I had even read out of the Bible to them about unity and love and how our team can, benefit by this, and here I am just losing it. So I go over to my guys. I'm like, guys, I'm so sorry. That was great effort, guys. I'll see you on Monday. And I go home. And I remember talking to Lori, and I remember saying, if I can't control myself, I shouldn't even be coaching. And I was thinking, this is going to be my last year coaching. I hated how I felt. I just felt horrible all night, couldn't stop thinking about it. Woke up the next morning. You ever have a dream where you're dreaming that you went to school without your pants on or something, and you wake up and you think, oh, good, that was just a dream.
Yeah.
Same feeling. I wake up and oh gosh, that really did happen last night.
Right.
I was just so embarrassed, But, hey, Sunday, so, we get ready, we go to church. Our pastor was actually this older gentleman from Scotland and played for Chelsea when he was younger.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember you talking about that guy.
Yeah. And maybe I'll talk to him, about it. But, still too embarrassed, So anyway, we're sitting there in church. I'm sitting right on the aisle there, just, listening to the sermon. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he started preaching about pride. I'm like, oh gosh, this is the last thing I want to hear.
No doubt.
Come on. So I'm sitting there just waiting for him to finish, and church to finish. And so he finishes, and then they're just wrapping up, with offering and all that kind of stuff. The ushers are coming up, and I'm just sitting there with my kind of head down waiting. And the usher comes to our row, and I go and I reach for the offering plate, and I look up. It's the referee.
Oh my days. It is not. You've never told me that story.
It's the referee. And I'm like, I grab the plate and I hand it to Laura. I'm like, that's the referee. So I'm sitting there and the cold sweat start coming, and I look up yeah, that's him. That's him. Oh my.
Did he recognize you?
Gosh. Well, I didn't get eye contact with him at the time, but yes. So I keep looking back. He gets toward the back of the church, and I can't take it anymore. I get up and I go to the back of the church. I'm like, I am so sorry about yesterday. Can I talk to you right after the service? So he says yes. So after the service, I go back there, and I'm standing there, and I apologize to him, and he's gracious enough to forgive me. But I stand there I just remember thinking how did I get here? I'm standing at the back of a church, apologizing to this guy who I had fellow believer who had absolutely berated the day before. And I'm like, how did I get to this point? And I realized at that point that it was an issue of my heart. And I needed heart surgery, and I needed to start cutting some stuff out. And that began me on a journey of just really processing all of those things.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've known you since 1989. That story will preach. But
that's identity.
Yeah, it's all identity. And I wonder how many times, being a pastor and being a coach, I have had to become well aware that it's known that I'm a pastor and a coach. And there's times I know that there are referees that don't like Christians and don't like church and don't like pastors. And it's this is not going to go well for us because I know enough about this guy. He's either, looking for a reaction. But for me, that's what I needed to have to try and curtail the same ugly thing that can come out even at age 53. It can still come out.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't come out in what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And he probably listens to this podcast. I confess to the church and to you that when my red-haired Welsh assistant coach says exactly what he thinks, even though I don't do it, it really makes me happy, right? And so whether it happens that way, and that can happen with players, that can happen with parents. I mean, we read articles about it all the time.
Yeah.
You're putting God's spotlight on something that's way more important, and that is our identity in Christ. And that's an important lesson for all of us, for pastors, for people who go to church, people who just listen to the podcast, because you can take that lesson to anything in your life. That could be traffic, right? Who does this guy think he is? He's more important than me. Doesn't he know I have kids in this car? Look at him drive like a maniac. Where is he from? And living out the gospel in our day-to-day life is essentially one avenue of that is sports.
Yeah.
And so how many total years now have you guys been in sports ministry? Do you know the?
Yeah, this is 31 full time. I mean, yeah, and it has been a journey, that's for sure.
Right. And I think it was around the time that you went to Thailand that's when the Tabernacle first either got involved or started thinking about, okay, we had missions budget, and it's like, well, we're going to ask Graham and Lori West if we can be on their team. And so Tab family, you've seen Graham and Lori. If you're not watching this podcast, you've seen them bring greetings on our annual big give, when we do the thank yous and we have people from all over the world. You've seen Graham and Lori. Before we close, think about if there's anything that you want to say. I have some of my most fond memories besides our families together or vacations together, going to the mountains together, because we were always on the cheap because we were missionaries and we're poor. So it was always like, hey, we can ride together, But getting to play with Graham was a great dribbler and finisher and scorer. And I love to play the cross or the big pass. And I was telling Ryan Jones, the Welshman, this story is one of my, the first time we met, England and Bangladesh, and we were playing one of their national teams. I think it was the national B team. Mm-hmm. And I'd come on at halftime. And they had a saying in Bangladesh, and I won't repeat the whole saying because it's not always tab appropriate, but if you dribble one player, very good. If you dribble two player, even better. If you dribble three player, you're damn bloody fool. And they were always part of their mantra. Yeah. And the whole thing was because if you beat one guy, that's good. If you beat the second, that's even better. But if you try to beat the third, the first guy will come and kick you, right? And so I'd come on. Graham played the whole game. He's playing up front. I'm playing in the midfield. And I was also a bit of a dribbler, not as good as Graham. But I dribbled one player, my first touch of the game. Dribbled two player, even better. I got cracked so hard I thought my leg was broken. I was thinking about this last night as I was falling asleep. I thought it was, there was blood between my shin and my shin guard. And I was like, I can't play at this level. These guys are lunatics. Because, they were aggressive and fast, and it was a tight game. And so the best part is next time I touch the ball, I wanted to get rid of it as quickly as I could. And so I just hoofed one as high and as far as I possibly could. Just get it out, get it gone, right? Well, as it just so happens, the next day there's a news article that Graham shows me, and it says substitute midfielder Vermiglia makes an impact when he lofts a beautiful ball forward that striker Graham West ran onto and finished. So my Hail Mary, get it away, I don't want to die clearance, Graham ran onto, beat three players and the keeper and scored. And it was like, yeah, I floated this gorgeous pass. I was just.
That's my story.
That's my story. It was self-preservation because I still have the scar. I'm pretty sure on one of my shins, for that. But thanks for being here and for sharing those stuff. What are you doing right now? Like, what's your main focus? I know you've been to way more countries than I've been to. What countries can you tell us that either you just came from or your guys are headed to, or?
Yeah, I mean, we have been doing a lot through a ministry that serves the Persian church,
Okay.
fastest growing church in the world. Unbelievable stories of what God's doing through the Persian church right now. So we continue to serve them, and we're next month we're going to be conducting a training online for a lot of coaches in Turkey and nearby countries, and where these coaches are just working with just thousands of kids. I mean, it's just exciting to see what God's doing on a weekly basis there. Next week, I'm actually heading to Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, back to Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And we'll be conducting some more trainings for some coaches there. And we've been going back there a number of times, and God's just building a movement of sports ministry through Bangladesh, where at one point they were kicking people out, but now nationals are really just grabbing a hold and taking this. And then about a week after that, we head over to Hong Kong, Indonesia, and Korea for some meetings and trainings over there. So I'll tell you, again, I said once before, we're just sitting back and watching God work and trying not to get in the way. But God has just brought some unbelievable partners across our paths for us to work with, that are serving and that are in these various countries. But it's our partnership with you guys, that we're grateful for, just how you guys allow us to be able to go and do these things and come alongside and partner with us. And we have partners that, like, whether in numerous countries, that pray for you guys.
Wow.
And
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And it's just it's the body.
Yeah.
We were just recently in Kenya, up in Kakuma, which is working with a bunch of South Sudanese refugees there in a community there. And they're all connected to churches there. And just, again, we're just sharing with them about, just how all of sports ministry works and how churches come behind. And they're just, those churches just have literally nothing, but they are reaping the benefits of, and the church is thriving in a refugee camp in the middle of nowhere.
Because if you have a Bible and a soccer ball, you're a magnet for kids. And the soccer ball is the magnet.
Absolutely.
And then wow.
Absolutely. So we really do. It really just, it's humbling, and just the gratefulness for the partnership that we've had with you guys, just for your hearts to be so intentional in wanting to see the gospel move forward. And sports can be, we're involved in that in order to see existing churches strengthened and new churches being planted, and to see discipleship just thrive in those environments. So
it's our
we
privilege.
appreciate it.
We appreciate you. One of the cool things, and this is not what it's about, because we support missionaries that are in one place, but one of the great things about Graham and Lori West is like, if you want to put pins on a map, this multiplying multipliers model is a beautiful model, and so it's our privilege to be a small part of that. I was going to ask you, if I'm listening and I want to get involved, either I want to pray for Graham and Lori, I want to support Graham and Lori, because we encourage our people to be generous, not just with their tithes and offerings and with our big give that's coming up, our annual Thanksgiving offering, but we encourage people to support missionaries on their own. How can they follow you? Or is there a place they can follow you and or your ministry, or get involved somewhere that way?
Yeah, maisoccer.org.
Yeah.
It might be .com.
I think, but it's the only MAI Soccer.
MAI
Yeah,
Soccer.
MAI Soccer. Yep. And we're on there and represented, and you can go to our...
we're under headquarters, probably.
Yep.
And
under headquarters, and you can definitely follow us that way.
Yeah. We've had student athletes from the Tabernacle over the years, including my own daughter, that have gone on missions tours. And so if I'm a parent and my kid's into soccer and I want he or she to have a good experience, we could go on there as well, or my kid's in college or something like that. Yep. And I know it's not just players. Sometimes you'll take chaplains or trainers and so forth. And so it's a huge eye-opening opportunity to be on there. How can the Tabernacle family, podcast family, how can we pray for you? Like at this season in your life? Like what do you want to go on the air? Besides just your provision,
it's a very
your care.
interesting stage of life. Empty nesters, adult children. I'm almost 60, Graham's 60.
You guys don't look 60.
Thank you.
Yeah, you need to slow down though.
It's a different season, but it's exciting too because it's like Graham's not playing on the team, but the Lord's still giving him opportunity. It's like about 40 years of sports ministry experience. When he started going on these trips and things, that he is now able to pour into another generation and train. And then those trainers are training trainers, and and so
it's a domino effect that just keeps going.
Yeah, it's an exciting opportunity, and we're really grateful that in this stage we're still just following Jesus, walking forward, pouring everything we are into the work He's given us. So I would just be asking for prayer, for wisdom, for continued health, for His will to be done in our family, in the work He's given us, in our relationships. I've told the kids in our family forever that if I had to boil everything down as far as living in God's will and just kind of making a simple statement, almost like a philosophy of life, is to love the person in front of you. So to all the moms out there who are like, what? I'm not in Africa sharing the gospel. I'm not traveling to all these countries. I'm home just cleaning poopy diapers and toilets and trying to come up with dinner. And it's like your value and worth is not in those things. It's who God says you are. It's your value, your identity is not in that to-do list. It's not in your Christian things you do. It's just love who's in front of you. And you're in God's will. You're loving whoever He puts in front of you, whether you're at a grocery store and the checkout person is there. There's opportunity no matter what to love with God's love. And I think when our roles started changing, when I was staying home with the kids and not traveling with Graham, I struggled with, oh my gosh, who am I now?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get the laundry done or get a shower. That was like my big accomplishment. It was just like, I didn't know who I was for a while because I thought, well, I'm supposed to be doing these Christian things. And then somewhere along the line, God just made it really clear that it's not that. You are who I have told you are. You're worth my life. And so no matter what role we're in or what we're doing as believers, we're reflecting Christ to this world. We're light in darkness. So it's not that somehow what we're doing is just so, that's so amazing. It is amazing because God's doing it. But I mean, it's not like...
It's no different.
It's not like this is any more valuable in God's eyes than the mom who's alone in the house, or the husband who works in a factory, or a janitor, or a doctor or whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We're all reflecting Christ in this world, and we all can love the person in front of us. So just do it. And you're in
Beautiful.
God's will.
That's perfect
Yeah,
because
so-
it isn't just for the mom. It's for the player who's no longer playing.
Mm.
It's for the 53-year-old pastor who the last time or every time he plays with his high school players, he gets hurt now.
Right.
I don't know who I'm talking about, right? It's not in that. It's love. So, yeah, knowing him and making him known.
Mm-hmm.
And as it's evolved, how that fleshes out is loving the person who's in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfect. That's a perfect little capstone because that pulls everyone in. So thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
And thanks
Thank
for sharing one of your worst moments. We value that at the Tab. We value authenticity.
Yeah.
Darcy, who we're still trying to get on this podcast, if you're listening, Darcy, I know you will because it's your buddy Lori's on here, is she always says, don't be the hero of your own stories. Do not be the hero of your own stories. So thanks so much, not just for visiting, but for partnering with us, for being on the podcast. I know it's not everyone's favorite cup of tea. So Benji, you got any questions or anything to add for the Slicer and Mrs. Slicer? If you want to know why is the Slicer, you have to ask him at a maybe at a service you can catch him. It has to do with his mad skills and those deodoras flashing by. But thanks so much for being here.
Yeah,
I love
thank
you
you.
guys.
Thank you,
And,
guys.
yeah,
We love you guys. Yeah.
sweet.
Appreciate it.
Until next time, we don't know if Britton will ever be back. He's probably eating Whataburger as we speak. He's always talking about Whataburger. No free shout-outs for Whataburger. But until next time, this is Graham, Lori, Benjamin, and me signing off.